Okay, so let's start. I'm going to be talking about AWS Lambda and AWS Amplify. So I want to know who is using any of these two. I mean, who is using AWS Lambda today? Okay, more or less. Okay, fine. What about AWS Amplify? Perfect. Perfect, you are the perfect audience for this talk. So let's get started. This is probably the most important bit. So this is my name, okay? I'm not French. It seems that I'm French, but I'm not French. I'm Spanish from Barcelona. And my name is pronounced Gerard Sans. This is in Catalan. In Spanish is Gerardo Sans, which is completely different. In English is Gerard Sans, more or less. In French, Gerard Sans. So in any language you will never find me, unless you pronounce it like my family, okay? So I'm a developer advocate at AWS. AWS is Amazon Web Services. And you can see that I have a lot of time to take selfies. I mean, this is the most important thing, isn't it? This is my cat, Percy. Very good. So I've been talking a lot. So one day I decided to go full-time speaker and trainer. And for the last 4 years I've been busy. So you can see all the places I've been. I'm based in the UK. Even being Spanish, I moved to the UK a long time ago. And now I work for Seattle, but I'm remote, which may be, I mean, there's any remote people here? Okay, you can work anywhere in the world, so it's the same for my job. So here, just a warning, this are my views and my opinions. If you don't agree, it's fine, but these are not my employer. Just in case I get in trouble, I always get in trouble. So let's look at the timeline. And this is just to get you all in the same page. So we need to go to 2014 to see the first public release of AWS Lambda. I mean, who was a developer at this time? I see a lot of young people. Maybe you were not even a developer at this time. Well, it's not that late. I mean, it's not so far away. It's just 2014. So it's quite recent technology. And this is the first offering from AWS. It takes 1 year to get an open source project to build on top of it. And that will be serverless architecture. And I think that you took the logo from, I mean, the logo looks like very similar to the serverless logo. If you look at the serverless Paris, it's just blue. I mean, it's just a change of the color. I mean, I don't know if that's a trademark issue. But yeah, we got an open source project to build on top of it. It takes just another year to get the same offering from Google, and this will be Google Cloud Functions. Very similar offering. This is 2 years later, and then the same year Microsoft releases Azure Functions. So this is a little bit of story, of history, just to get what has been going on in this space. 2017 we get Firebase Functions. Who knows Firebase? Okay. So this is a database that is running also using the cloud. And we get also some new tooling. This is AWS SAM CLI. So you can automate some of these resources in the cloud and also AWS Lambdas. You can see the logo on the helmet. I mean, this is a nice logo. And just at this time, we also get AWS Amplify. So this is also an offering of AWS to build on top of Lambda. Okay. So let's see the evolution. And this is a new paradigm. So what's the evolution to serverless? Well, we start with the monolith. And usually, unfortunately, there's still a lot of people working on the monolith. So if you're using Java, you're using .NET, you're using Python, you are still in the monolith. So you need to see what's coming, because there has been few changes. And the next phase, when we look at different technologies, we see microservices and support for containers. So who is using this new approach? Okay, most of you. So that's a little bit better. And then after microservices, we get functions. And these are more recent, and they offer you much more capabilities. And that will be kind of the door to serverless. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about it, but you can see the evolution. If you are in the monolith, you can skip microservices and go to functions, instead of learning all the way through. So this is an exciting time. Some people use both. I mean, of course, you can switch from any of these paradigms and still be, functional. But in the future, you will be seeing more of microservices and functions architectures. So what's the difference? This is just an overview for the people that is not familiar with it. So we get, on the traditional paradigm, we get custom-built architectures. So that means that every time that we want to build the same thing, it's going to be hard. We need to go through the same steps. It's a little bit fragile, so it won't be as solid as more modern options. And there's few things on the architecture and infrastructure side. So you get fixed capacity. Unless you add some layer to increase the capacity for your services, you will get just a fixed capacity. If you get near that capacity, then you will have to buy new resources or new servers. That also comes with a fixed cost. So you need to maintain maybe a contract, maybe you need to maintain a machine, and that will give you just a fixed capacity and also cost. And of course, the whole thing is slow because of all of this. And when we look at serverless, it's targeting all of these issues, and it's providing a better option. Probably from all of these points, the best one is that you only pay for what you use. And this is very interesting, for example, for startups. Imagine you have a service, you build a new service that you want to be very successful, but it's not successful yet. So you don't need to pay for that usage because you have a contract with some service provider. So that will be a little bit more convenient for you. Of course, the other benefits are also very attractive for startups and also enterprise. So usually I'm gonna rate this with 2 stars, and of course serverless with 3 stars. So yes, just to make a difference. But you can still do a lot with the traditional model. So how these two compare? The traditional looks very much like this. So we have different features all together, and they are usually living on the back end. And when we move to a serverless architecture, you will see that some of these pieces have changed, have moved. So we can see that there's some logic that goes into the client. And this will be like this single-page applications. And we also see that some features, they live independently. So we have authentication living as a separate service. We have the monolith that has been split in different functions. That's the cubes. And then the data source, I mean, that's still one piece of the puzzle. Okay. So that should be your reaction. It's like, oh wow, maybe you didn't know. I mean, who didn't know about this? Like the history and the evolution. Nobody? You're still sleepy? Okay. I mean, it gives you a lot of features. So the problem usually to access serverless, to get access to this new paradigm, it takes quite a lot of time. You need to invest time in learning these different services. You need to invest time in architecting your solution in a serverless way. So you need some help. And the tooling that I'm going to show you today is to help you do that very fast. So what is serverless at the end? Some people use different definitions. So I'm going to just show you a couple of them. So one, it's a little bit more open. So it's using third-party cloud services to build apps. And this is more or less from the last diagram that I showed you, that we had different pieces that we could use, like authorization, data services, and this is very convenient. The other one that is also very popular for serverless is this event-driven stateless architecture that will add these compute containers automatically so you can scale up and down your services. But this is a little bit constrained, because if you look at the functions as the only option for serverless, then you cannot build full systems. You will need to open that definition, otherwise you will just be looking at some functions alone. And that's not really what everybody is thinking when they talk about serverless. So don't think about serverless about just functions. It can also be like third-party components to build whole systems. So these are the main features. You don't have to manage servers. That's very convenient. Never pay for idle usage. So when nobody's using your app, you don't pay for it. And then that's probably the most important. When you get, imagine you get like a high spike of usage. If you didn't plan for that, your server is probably going to be falling down. And that could cost you a lot of money. If you are selling some product, you're going to miss some of those sales. So that's very important that you don't have to rely on the service to respond to these spikes in the right way. And then, of course, you have high availability. That means that you can deploy internationally, and that will work no matter where you are for your customers. So these are like really interesting features. Of course, when you are building these from the old paradigm, you have to learn a lot of these details. When you use serverless, you can use the knowledge from AWS that is already built in these services. So you get that for free. Massive scale. Okay, I hope nobody's building a new startup like Facebook. I mean, it's difficult to be in that position, isn't it? But imagine you get lucky and your new application gets really popular. Well, with serverless, you can access to that massive scale without having to do any changes or go through any different stages to get there. And if you see the customers using serverless and AWS, you can see that these are not small companies. I mean, this is a reliable technology, and you can see that not only AWS is successful, but you can see also Alibaba, you can see a lot of the new, very successful companies, they are investing in serverless. And also more popular, maybe less big companies, but these are close to us. As developers, Hoover, of course. Hoover today was terrible. But you can probably use these services, and you know that these are very reliable. So what figures I can share with you? Well, this is the figures of the usage of these services and how they respond. So we have for AWS Lambda, which is one service, it has trillions of executions per month. Of course, this is for all of the customers of AWS. Have you heard any issue on the news? This is happening for years now. With this kind of volume, there's no issues. When you build on serverless, you're using the same reliability because these are exactly the same code, the same service that you're going to use to build your app. And this is the same for service. This is S3, this is for storage. So if you use S3 in your application, you also get access to this scalability, like massive scale. And this is like millions of requests per second. I don't know how well you do in your test of the scalability of what you build, but this is quite impressive. So this is how you feel. You feel like you are in control. You're the captain. I like the picture. I mean, you know, if you have a pet, you do this to the pet. I mean, it's a little bit sad, but it's very funny. Okay. I mean, this cat is in some kind of trance. Like, what is going on? Okay, so modern tooling. What happens is if you want to use serverless and you want to start from scratch, it's going to take you quite a lot of effort. So I'm going to show you what's the tooling available that you can use. I mean, if you want to use serverless anyway. So AWS Amplify will try to give you the best experience when trying to develop on top of AWS Cloud. And this is today offering a native platform and also web. And this will be on top of a framework that supports all of these different platforms, developer tools, so it's a lot of help in there for you. And there's also the cloud services. So who knows how many AWS services are there? Or maybe some number. You can throw some number. A lot, like a big list. There's at least more than 150. And of course, each of them will take you like a few days to master. I mean, maybe months to master. So AWS Amplify tries to do that initial setup to get something working in just a few clicks. And you can rely on what's being built because the teams have built the templates that are going to deploy those resources for you. So these are best practices already inbuilt in using this tooling. If you're using a CLI in your developer cycle, this is very similar. So you get the best practices just by using the tooling. And this leads to the CLI. And the CLI, we will use it running some commands. And these commands will create the resources and provision what we need to add different features and services. So this is how it works. I'm not going to go through in detail, but these are a few of the commands. And you will repeat this for the different services. Maybe it's more interesting, this is like the full cycle, but more interesting is what features you can get. And in AWS Amplify, we call them categories. And these categories will be just by running a command, amplify at, and the name of the category, you will get that in your project. So we have few categories here, auth, API, interactions, analytics. I mean, you have all of the common things that you will be adding, like the little pieces that you need to build your applications. Of course, we also have support for functions. So that also opens the door for Lambda functions. There's more to it. Today I'm going to be focusing on the API and functions, these two categories. But there's also some interesting new categories that can also be used. So if you want to use translation, you can also use text-to-speech and like audio to text. There's also facial recognition and also comprehend that will do things like finding metadata from pictures or finding what's the language passing a text. So there's many features. These are all related to machine learning. So if you need any of these features, you can add them very easily. And
Probably the most interesting thing is that you don't have to go through learning each of these services from scratch. You can just run a command that I was, like the ones that I was showing you, and you get a working example already. So that's the interesting thing of this AWS Amplify product. And these are usually the reactions. Maybe this is too much. It's like, what? Of course, if you haven't used the cloud before, you are thinking like, okay, so what's the difference? What is developing without AWS Amplify? Well, it's like developing with a SDK. So you have a long list of API calls, and you need to figure out what's the setup. And that's going to take you some time. I mean, I know you are smart, but even when you are smart, you will need to go some trial and error. The good thing of AWS Amplify is that we'll give you the best setup to start using that service with no hassle. Okay, look at this. Yes. Okay, so let's look at the demo. So I wanted to show you how you can integrate Lambda, and I created like a small demo to show it. So this is the architecture that I'm going to be using, and that's what we call Fullstack Serverless. And here you can see the setup for the single page application. So we have some HTML, some CSS, we have some JavaScript, and that will be using AWS Amplify. Then we also have a stage where we authenticate the users, and we are going to use Amazon Cognito for that. The good thing about using Amazon Cognito is we get a lot of features out of the box. Okay, and my whole demo is going to be using this setup. So I'm going to be creating an API that is going to access AWS Lambda, and that Lambda is going to access a REST API in the backend. So this is the setup, and I'm going to be defining the AWS Lambda. I'm going to be testing the Lambda in my local environment, and then I'm going to be showing some results. And I'm going to show you how all of these steps look like. Okay. So to support Amplify functions, we use the same approach. So we use Amplify at and the name of the category. This is a standard through all of the categories. So that's the same for functions. Amplify at function, and we will define the code for that function. We will get some templates to help us on that. Then we can go through this cycle. We will build the function. This is still locally. Then we can also do some tests by running a function in bulk. And then when we are happy, then we can release it into the cloud. So this is just a regular cycle. In this case, it's for functions. And yeah, let's see how that looks. Okay, so this is the result of kind of a hello world function. And when you go through the steps of Amplify add functions, it will go through some questions, and then at the end of that process, it will open like a skeleton of a Lambda function. And we can see the code here is just exporting a method, which is handler. And if you haven't used a Lambda function before, it receives 3 arguments. We can see only 2 here, but it's enough for this hello world example. So the first one is the event, and the event is who make the invoke, who invoke the Lambda. Lambdas can be invoked in different contexts, but in our case, it's going to be from the API gateway. So that's going to be who is going to invoke our Lambda. And the information of that invocation is going to be in the first argument of this handler. The second one, the context, is the execution context and also the context of this function. So you can access also that information. Here we can see an example. This is just for test, for local test. and we can define the event. Let's see how that looks. So on a project that is using Amplify, we will create with Amplify in it a folder with the configuration for your project. And this is the Amplify project here. My project is called Amplify Lambda, and I'm going to navigate just to show you what's inside. We can see different folders and files. I'm interested on the backend. And here I have few things. I created the API. This is the API gateway. I also created the auth category. That's going to be my Amazon Cognito. And in the functions, I can find different functions I created just for today. But the one that I'm interested in is this hello world. Okay. And inside the source folder, I can see this event JSON. So this event JSON is just object with different parameters. And this is exactly the same shape that will be when this is invoked by any service in AWS. It's just that you need to know these properties in your scenario. But let's see how that will be used. So here we can see that we can access the event and the property, and then we can also, I'm also consoling log the context, so you can take a look at it. When we return from a Lambda function, we can return by using 3 different methods from the context. One is done, and the other 2 succeed and fail. These are just different usage of this API. You can use just done if you want. And the first argument here is an error, if there is any, or the message that you will return back. So let's call this just to test. And when we are developing using AWS Amplify, we have a mock environment. So we can mock the environment of a Lambda function, but locally in our machine. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to change this one to the hello, just to show you the output. So this will be the first thing. We just specify what will be this function doing, and now I want to test it for the first time. So let's see that. So here is going to be asking me a few questions. And it just wants to know where is my context. So this is the handler function, where is the file, and also what is the method that I want to call. Of course, if we have an event JSON, I can also specify that. And here we have the output. So these are the console logs that we saw in the code, and also the context that I'm outputting. So you can see the functions done, succeed and fail, and also the output here at the bottom. So as you can see, you have control of all of the environment. When you are happy with this function, then you will go and publish it. What I can do just to show you how that looks like is maybe I can change it a little bit. So let's change this function. I mean, it doesn't need to be crazy. So I will just change it, and Amplify will recognize that change. So let's see that. I have different commands. One of them is a status, and you can see here all my resources. Of course, I have all the functions I want to demonstrate, but the first one is hello world, and you can see that there's an update just because I've changed it. So let's run very quickly Amplify push, so I can use it. I can use it on the cloud. So let's run this so you see how that looks like. So this is the normal cycle that a developer will be doing. You see your Lambda, build the feature that you want to build, do some tests, and then push it to the cloud. Okay, so let's see at another example. So this is just like a small intro, and it's already finished. So let's see the next one. The next one is a little bit more complex. For any AWS Lambda function, we can also install their dependencies. So this is just a node code that we run in the cloud. So we can add any dependencies that we need. And I'm going to show a little bit complex scenario, which is installing Express server. So let's see how that looks like. So this is a little bit more elaborated example. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an Express server that will be fulfilling the request from API gateway. The API that I want to implement will be living in this port, in the port 3000, and I'm going to be adding this endpoint. So that's going to give me back an information of cryptocurrencies that are available, and I'm going to use this API coin lore. So this is just giving me a list of cryptocurrencies and what's the value for each of them. So here I can see that the setup is a little bit more elaborated. This is just to get the Express server app running, and I'm going to just run it for you so you can see it working. So it's exactly the same. I can just run this Amplify mock function and then the name of the function. As before, I need to provide this information, and I get the output, which is the server is up and running. And this code, let me show you the code, is this one here. So now this server is listening on port 3000, and I can do my first query. I will change to another screen here, and I have this command. This command is just doing a curl request, and I'm using now my server, which is listening in this port, and also using like some parameters passing in to the API that I was showing. What I'm using after that is just to get an output that it's nice. Okay, so this is the output. Of course, here I have some options to get more or less information. So let's change that. This is for pagination, but I can pick a couple of items here. So you can see that it's up and working. So now we have this server which is accessing that endpoint, and it's living inside a Lambda. And if we look at the folder for this function, it's a little bit more complex. So we also install, it has a package JSON, and for this one we have dependencies of Axios and also the Express server. So you can add any dependencies, and it will hold up that code for you. Okay, so this is a little bit of what I wanted to show you. The final architecture then will be just publishing secure endpoint, which will be an API gateway. Maybe I'll go back to the... So this is the final setup. And in order to create that, I need to add an API, which is Amplify add API, and just link that with the Lambda function. So that will be the whole setup. And that's just by running some CLI commands. So, I mean, it can take maybe a few minutes to set up this application. And as I was explaining before, it will give you access to all of the features of a serverless created application. Okay, so that's more or less what I want to show you. These are different details. I'll share the slides with you on the meetup, so you can see these. This is just the folder structure of a function. So if you want to learn more, these are some people that you should know. They are from the AWS Amplify team, and they create content around it, so you can check it. Okay, thanks for listening. I don't know if we have questions, or we can do some questions if you. So one thing that I didn't show, so the question was how we can integrate this with AWS Amplify continuous integration. What you need to do is link your project with an online repo, and usually you can attach this to a GitHub repo, and then link that with AWS Amplify project. Then once you do that, every commit will redeploy the whole solution. So you will get support for any resource that you are using. So if you are using functions, you will also get that support. So when you change your code, of course, because this is on the Amplify folder, it will just trigger a new redeploy. And that will cover both front end and back end. Yeah, that's a different talk, but yeah, that's also a possibility, which is quite nice. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Cheers.